The city was drowning in rain that night, the kind of storm that made even the streetlights flicker in exhaustion. The roads glistened like rivers of black glass, and every raindrop echoed a story of loneliness, fear, or pain. But none so desperate as the one unfolding outside St. Mary's Hospital. Under a broken street lamp stood a woman, soaked to the bone, clutching a limp little girl in her arms. Her thin shawl was no match for the cold wind. Her name was Emma Carter, a single mother barely surviving on the wages of 2 cleaning jobs. Her 7-year-old daughter, Lily, was her entire world. Please. Emma's voice cracked through the storm. "Somebody please help my daughter!" The hospital doors were closed for the night to anyone without an emergency admission. And apparently, in this city, emergency came with a price tag. Inside, a nurse glanced up from her desk as Emma banged on the glass. "Ma'am, you can't be here," she said impatiently, pressing the intercom. "My daughter, she can't breathe." Emma's voice trembled as she held Lily closer. "She's burning up. She needs help." The nurse's face didn't soften. "You need to go to the front desk and pay the admission fee first." "No payment, no treatment. It's policy. Please," Emma sobbed. "I don't have the money right now. Just look at her. She's dying." But the nurse had already turned away. She'd seen too many like Emma, desperate, penniless, invisible. Emma sank to her knees on the wet pavement, tears and raindrops mixing on her face. Lily's breaths came in short, shallow gasps. Her tiny hand gripped her mother's sleeve weakly. "Mama," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It hurts." Emma's heart shattered. "I know, baby. Hold on, please. Don't close your eyes." She looked around, hoping, praying for a miracle. The city lights blurred through her tears. People walked past, umbrellas shielding them from the storm, their eyes avoiding the scene. To them, she was just another poor woman, another problem they didn't want to see. Then, out of nowhere, headlights cut through the darkness. A sleek black car rolled up the hospital driveway, its engine humming softly. The doors opened and a tall man stepped out, holding an umbrella. His shoes didn't even splash. The rain seemed to move around him. It was Alexander Reed, billionaire and CEO of Reed Industries. Known for his ruthlessness in business and his towering empire, he was the kind of man whose name alone could open doors, or close them forever. Tonight, he was only visiting the hospital to inspect the new children's wing his foundation had funded. For him, charity was publicity, numbers on a page, nothing more. Until he heard that voice. Through the rain, through the hum of his car engine, the cry pierced his chest like a blade. "Please, someone save my daughter!" He turned. Under the streetlight, he saw her, a woman on her knees, soaked and trembling, clutching a small, motionless child. Something about the image froze him. The guards were already trying to shoo her away. "Sir, ignore her," one of them said quickly. "She's been here for hours. No insurance, no paperwork." But Alexander didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on the little girl's face, pale, lips turning blue, raindrops gliding over her closed eyelids. "Her daughter?" he asked quietly. "Yes, sir. She says the kid's sick, but she can't pay, so—" Before the guard could finish, Alexander was already walking toward them. "Wait, Mr. Reed!" the hospital administrator called out, running after him, but Alexander didn't stop. When he reached the woman, she looked up, startled. Her eyes were red, swollen from crying. "Please," she begged, barely recognizing the man standing over her. "Please, sir. I don't know who you are, but my daughter. She can't breathe. They won't help her because I don't have the money." Alexander knelt down beside her, his expensive suit soaking in the rain. He looked at the little girl, her small chest rising unevenly. His jaw tightened. "How long has she been like this?" "3 days, Emma choked out. "I tried to give her medicine, but she got worse. I brought her here hours ago, but they said they can't admit her until I pay." Alexander turned his cold gaze toward the guard and nurse. "You let a child suffer outside your hospital. Over money?" the nurse stammered. "Sir, we just follow policy." "Your policy," he interrupted sharply, "almost killed a child." He stood up, his voice firm. "Get her inside, now." "Sir, Without registration, do I need to repeat myself? His tone cut through the storm like lightning. Get her inside! Within seconds, the staff scrambled to obey. Nurses rushed out with a stretcher. As they lifted Lily from her mother's arms, Emma clung to her child's hand until the last possible moment. Please save her, she whispered. Alexander watched as they wheeled the girl inside, the automatic doors closing behind them. He turned to Emma, who was still on her knees, trembling. Get up, he said gently, extending his hand. She hesitated, then took it. Her hand was cold and rough, calloused from years of work. He helped her to her feet. Thank you, she sobbed. I'll find a way to pay you back. I promise I will. Alexander shook his head. Don't worry about that right now. Just stay with your daughter. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The storm began to ease, the sound of rain fading to a whisper. When the doctor came rushing out minutes later, he gave a brief nod. We've got her on oxygen. She's critical, but we'll do everything we can. Emma pressed her hands together in silent prayer. Alexander simply nodded, watching her, something unexplainable stirring inside him. As she followed the doctors inside, he stood under the dim hospital light, water dripping from his umbrella. For years he had believed that success was measured in power and wealth. But tonight, watching a mother's trembling hands reach for her dying child, he felt something break open within him, something human, something forgotten. His assistant approached. Sir, your car is ready. Alexander didn't move. He was still looking toward the emergency ward. Cancel my meetings tomorrow, he said quietly. The assistant blinked. Sir, I said cancel them. I'll be here. And as the billionaire walked into the hospital, the same hospital that had turned away a poor woman moments ago, he didn't know that this stormy night would soon become the turning point of his entire life. Because sometimes, the richest hearts are found in the poorest moments. 2 days passed since that stormy night, but the sound of Emma's desperate cries still echoed in Alexander Reed's mind. He hadn't gone to his office, hadn't checked his emails, and hadn't taken a single business call. For the first time in years, the man who built an empire from steel and silence was restless, not because of a deal, but because of a memory. That night had cracked something open inside him. The hospital corridors were unusually quiet that morning when Alexander walked in. The rain had stopped. The air smelled of antiseptic and coffee. Nurses moved briskly between rooms and patients' families whispered soft prayers. As he approached the children's ward, his heart pounded, something unfamiliar for a man used to control. Through the glass window, he saw her. Little Lily, sitting up in bed, a thin blanket wrapped around her, smiling weakly as her mother spoon-fed her warm soup. Emma's clothes were still simple, but her face, that face glowed with relief. Alexander stood there for a long time, just watching. The nurse beside him noticed and whispered, "That child's lucky, sir. If she hadn't been treated that night, she wouldn't have made it till morning." He nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the little girl. When he finally walked into the room, Emma looked up in shock. She stood immediately, her eyes wide, hands trembling. "Sir, I didn't know you'd come back. I thought, people like you don't visit twice." Alexander smiled faintly. "I wanted to see how she was doing." "She's better," Emma said softly, tears forming in her eyes. "All thanks to you." He stepped closer to the bed. Lily's big brown eyes blinked up at him. "Are you the doctor?" she asked weakly. Alexander chuckled. "No, sweetheart. I'm just a friend," Lily smiled shyly. "Mommy said you're an angel." Emma blushed, wiping her tears quickly. "Don't listen to her, sir. She says silly things." Alexander looked at the child again. Her frail hand reached out, small, fragile, and wrapped around his finger. For a moment he froze. He hadn't felt a touch that gentle since his own daughter, the one he lost years ago. His voice lowered. "You'll be all right, Lily. You're very brave." The little girl nodded and leaned back on her pillow. Emma watched them quietly, her heart full but heavy. After a moment, she spoke. "Sir, I can't thank you enough. I owe you my life. If there's any way I can repay—" Alexander stopped her with a raised hand. "Don't say that. You owe me nothing. But I want to," she insisted. "I can clean, cook, do anything. Please let me earn this," he sighed. "You already did. You fought for your daughter when everyone else gave up. That's more than anyone could ever give me." She smiled weakly but didn't argue. As Alexander turned to leave, something caught his eye. A small photo frame on the bedside table. It showed a younger Emma, smiling, standing beside a construction site. He paused, frowning slightly. "That picture," he said slowly, pointing toward it. "Where was it taken?" Emma looked surprised. "Oh, that? It's from 10 years ago. I used to work as a cleaner at Reed Industries, your company. Back when I was younger." Alexander's eyes widened. "You worked for me?" She nodded. "Yes, sir. I was part of the cleaning staff on the construction team for your downtown office building. You probably don't remember me. I was just one of the many invisible faces in the background." He stared at her, something stirring deep within. Memories began to flicker, a faint image of a young woman mopping a hallway, always with a kind smile. The same woman who had once fainted from exhaustion during a night shift. He remembered. "You're the one who collapsed near the elevators," he said quietly. "I was there." Emma's eyes widened in disbelief. "You remember?" He nodded slowly. "You refused to leave until your shift ended, even after the doctor told you to rest. I thought you were stubborn back then." She laughed softly. "Maybe I was, but I needed that job. My husband had just left me and Lily was only a baby. Every paycheck mattered." The room fell silent. For the first time in years, Alexander felt guilt, deep and sharp. He had walked past so many people like her in his company, people who built his success brick by brick, yet he'd never really seen them. He took a deep breath. "You said your husband left?" Emma nodded. "Yes, he couldn't handle the responsibility. I've been raising Lily alone ever since. Some nights I didn't even know if we'd have food, but she kept me going." She looked at her daughter lovingly. Her smile kept me alive. Alexander's throat tightened. He turned away, blinking rapidly. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Emma frowned. "Sorry? For what?" "For being blind," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "For walking past people like you every day and never seeing their struggle. For donating money to hospitals and calling it charity, when I never bothered to ask who they were helping." Tears filled Emma's eyes again, but this time they were tears of compassion. "You helped me, sir. Twice. Once when I was just a worker, and now when I was a mother begging in the rain. You may not have seen me before, but you saw me when it mattered most." Her words hit him harder than any business failure ever could. He turned toward her, his expression softer than it had ever been. "Emma, from this day forward, I want to make sure you and Lily never have to beg again. You'll have a permanent home, a job at my company, not as a cleaner, but in administration. I'll personally take care of Lily's education. She'll go to the best school, the best doctors, everything." Emma's jaw dropped. "Sir, I can't accept that. It's too much." "No," he said firmly. "It's not enough." Lily looked up with sleepy eyes. "Mommy, are we rich now?" Emma laughed through tears, hugging her daughter tightly. "We're safe now, sweetheart." "That's all that matters," Alexander smiled faintly. "Safety is a kind of wealth, too." They stood there, the billionaire, the single mother, and her little girl, bound by something stronger than fate. As he left the room later, Alexander walked out of the hospital not as the powerful CEO the world feared, but as a man reborn. The storm outside had cleared completely, the morning sun spilling gold over the wet streets. For the first time in years, he felt light. He looked up at the sky and whispered to himself, "Maybe angels don't always fall from heaven. Sometimes they cry for help in the rain." He got into his car, but instead of heading to his office, he asked his driver to take him to the children's home his company funded. It was time to see what other lives he could change. Not for reputation, but for redemption. And somewhere in the children's ward, little Lily smiled in her sleep, whispering softly, "Thank you, Angel Man."